Well, good morning and happy Friday, the 1st of December. Man, where has this year gone? It's flying. So yeah, we are in December already, 1st of December. And this is the weather that we get to greet the month of December. Isn't it fitting? All I can say is that I'm at least glad the temperature is above freezing, because I've been driving in pretty much downpouring rain since about 4:30 this morning. So yeah, we made it to Sarah Wire in Crothersville, Indiana. We got loaded up there with spools of electrical wiring, and they did a real quick load this time. I think I was there for actually even under an hour, I think, which is always nice when they can get you in and out fairly quickly. So got loaded up, got on my way, and I had to hightail it as fast as I possibly can. What else is new? That's all I do is hightail it as fast as I possibly can. And on our way up to Eau Claire to bring this trailer up to them, to the headquarters of Menards in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So I made it as far as, let's see, I was on Interstate 74. Just as you cross into Illinois from Indiana, you go through kind of the Danville area there, and the very first rest stop that you hit is called, I believe it's called Salt Kettle something or other. But yeah, I stayed in there. I still had about an hour and a half or so, maybe a little more on my clock, but after reviewing all of the time and logistics and how long it takes to drive X amount of miles and blah, 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 it had occurred to me long before I shut down that I once again have a snowball's chance in hell of getting home on time. Absolutely impossible. Would not happen. So it really didn't make a difference whether I used my entire clock or not, because I'm not getting home on time anyway, so what's the point? Uh-oh, that doesn't look good. Oh, damn. Holy crap. Walmart truck and trailer on its side over there. Wow. That's awful to see. I hope they're okay. Man. Woo. Hope that driver's all right. I mean, it is still in the 40s temperature-wise, so I've been watching my mirrors and everything, all the componentry on the outside of the truck. For you new drivers, that's a little piece of advice. When you start getting borderline on temperature and it's raining, keep a very close eye on your wipers, your wiper arms, your mirrors, every single thing that sticks out on the outside of the truck. Watch them constantly. Because once you start seeing even the tiny little bit of ice start building up on anything, you need to slow your ass down real quick, because that, you want to be safer than sorry. Let's just put it that way. Anyhow, we are thankfully not at that threshold yet, so I'm still going relatively quickly, but of course I will drop the speed down, way down, if I start seeing any icing building up. So anyway, as I was saying, made it to that rest area. It was raining like cats and dogs last night, and it was dark, and I was tired, so I thought, you know what, yeah, I have an hour and a half, a little over an hour and a half left on my clock. I could keep running and get to the Farmer City rest area if I wanted to, but what's the point? You know, it was raining, it was dark, I was starting to get tired. You know, that's when it's better to make the decision to, you know, just be safe. You made it through the day, you made it through the shitty weather, park the truck, call it a day. So that's what I did. Yeah, up at 4:30, well, up earlier than that, but rolling by 4:30 in the morning. It is now 7:20 a.m. and this is what we have at 7:20 a.m. It's pretty much still dark. Raining cats and dogs. So we're a little north of Interstate 80 on I-39, heading up towards Route 88, Interstate 88. Actually, we're getting pretty close to Interstate 88, but we're going to continue northward on I-39, and then of course that all merges in with I-90, and then eventually I-94, and blah, 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 blah. And eventually, boom, you're in Eau Claire, 4 hours and change from now. Well, good morning and happy Saturday, December the 2nd. And yes, I said Saturday, and yes, I'm working. So anyway, not to beat that into the ground like I already haven't. We just completed our final drop and hook of the week. We are just departing the Plano, Illinois Walmart DC, heading south on El Domain Road to pick up Route 34 to meander our way back to Plainfield to our terminal, where I can drop this now empty trailer, or new empty trailer that we dropped and hooked, and drop it in the yard and park my tractor and get the hell out of here and go home, finally. We ended up going, let's see, how far did we go? We went all the way to Eau Claire, Wisconsin, came back down, and I made it to the Milton, Wisconsin rest area with about 20 minutes left on my clocks, and shut down there for the evening. And that ended up being a day of 677 miles. Not too shabby, considering the fact that I had to do a drop and hook in Eau Claire, which takes a little time because of the size of the facility. And because of all the inclement weather I had to drive through, I had to drive pretty slow because there was it was pretty slippery and icy and rainy and just nasty altogether. And I even stopped, which is a rare thing. I never do it, pretty much never do it. But in Eau Claire, there's a McDonald's with truck parking. So as I was departing Eau Claire, I was so freaking hungry. I thought, you know what, screw it. I'm not on a schedule anymore as far as, in a time crunch. I'm going to stop and stuff my face. So that's exactly what I did. So, with a food break and an Eau Claire drop and hook, still managed, and bad weather, still managed 677 safe, completed miles. So I'd say that was a pretty damn strong day. Yeah, and now we are heading back. So before I call it a week as far as the videos are concerned, I was reminded of something on the way down this morning. I left Milton this morning at 4:30 in the morning, actually 4 o'clock in the morning, and started driving again. It is now almost 7:30. So I was thinking on the way down, because it was kind of rainy, snowing, and it was slow going because it was very, very potentially dangerous conditions with icing and all of that. And I had mentioned yesterday about for new drivers to watch any ice buildup on the truck, keep an eye on that. The other thing I wanted to share for the new drivers, and maybe even not so new drivers, maybe they've never been taught or have never thought about it before or something, but that's a matter of the Kingpin and how important the physics around the Kingpin are in keeping your ass safe. And I will elaborate on that, of course, because it might not make any sense. Way back in the beginning of my time driving, I had an occasion where I was with a, what do they call them anyways? OSR. And anybody that's with Schneider, has been with Schneider, you know what OSRs are, of course. But for those not familiar, OSRs are a very elite small group of Schneider drivers that are essentially driver trainers on steroids. They are the most experienced, most knowledgeable people within the entire Schneider organization when it comes to operation of the truck and safety issues and mechanic, just all around knowledge of how to keep the shiny side up and rubber side down, as they say. These are usually drivers with years of experience that can be measured in decades, not in single years. So these are the people that you really want to listen to, because they have a boatload of knowledge, and I always enjoyed when I had an opportunity to spend a little bit of time with an OSR and shoot the shit with them, because they're just an incredible wealth of knowledge, and I picked up so many tips and learned so many things from them. And one of the things that really stuck in my brain was one time I was in Gary and I was doing my yearly test check, whatever you want to call it, with the OSR. And he was a super cool guy, and during the course of what we needed to do, he started talking about the kingpin of the trailer, and how it fits into the fifth wheel. Now, everybody knows that drives a truck that, the kingpin slides into the middle of that fifth wheel, gets locked in, and there you go. Now the trailer is attached and locked in with the tractor, and it kind of pivots and turns on that axis. But the one thing he said was that a good driver always has somewhere in his mind, whether it's at the front of his or her mind or somewhere in there, should always have some sort of a cognizance of the physics of the kingpin. And by that, he went on to explain that you need to be aware of the forces that are at play on that kingpin at all times. And basically what he meant was that kingpin is held, tightly in that fifth wheel skid plate, and there is a certain degree of play in there, right? Not much, there shouldn't be much, but there's a little bit of play in order to allow it to move the way it needs to move. And so if you can imagine that, looking down at a fifth wheel skid plate and looking at that center hole, now visualize a kingpin sitting in the middle of that hole. I mean, dead center in the middle, not touching any wall of the kingpin, or of the skid plate. Now, start visualizing when you start driving. Now, when you start driving straight, where is the pressure of the kingpin? Well, the kingpin is putting pressure on the back locking latch of that skid plate, right? So the tractor is now pulling the trailer by that kingpin. Seems rather obvious, right? So, and it is obvious, right? But it's something that it's helpful to always keep a visual of in your brain. Because where it becomes super important is when the kingpin is not being pulled any longer. When the kingpin actually begins to push forward against that skid plate. And usually that's when you're on a downhill grade or when you're braking. All of a sudden, all of the weight that is in that trailer, and oftentimes the weight of a trailer can be close to double what the tractor weighs, right? A conventional sleeper cab, dual axle tractor weighs, somewhere, give or take, somewhere around 20,000 pounds-ish. Some are 1,000 or 2,000 heavier or a little lighter or whatever, but around 20,000 pounds is usually kind of a benchmark, kind of a safe zone for a tractor weight. Well, sometimes you got, 40,000 pounds of goods that you're carrying, not to mention the weight of the actual trailer. So you can have close to, if not approaching, double the weight inside that trailer box and with the trailer as you have in your entire tractor. So now think about that in terms of physics and the laws of gravity and the laws of motion and momentum. When that much weight is pushing against that skid plate, that fifth wheel skid plate, that is a very, very potentially dangerous thing, right? And the only thing that's keeping your butt on the road and keeping you safe is the traction of the 10 tires of the tractor on the road. Now, it's a mistake to think that all of the weight of that trailer is only on the trailer, and that the tractor is 20,000 pounds. You also have to factor in, and this is where math gets very complicated, and it's only engineers really have to go there. You don't have to get that deep into it. But of course, since the trailer is sitting on that fifth wheel skid plate, a tremendous amount of the weight of that total trailer is then being applied to the drive wheels of the tractor, right? So you always want your drive wheels to be a little heavier than your trailer tandems in a perfect world. That's the ideal situation for optimized control and traction. But again, back to the skid plate and the Kingpin, think about when you're coming downhill and you're doing, let's say, 65 miles per hour and you're on a 4% grade coming down. Well, yes, you have a good amount of the weight of that trailer on your drive wheels, and that's actually helping your traction. But the other force at play is all of that weight is wanting to come forward, and gravity comes into play, and gravity's wanting to pull it down. Now, if once you've driven a truck once down a hill, you know exactly what that is. The truck wants to take off, and it's partially because of the tractor itself is heavy, but most of it is because of all of the weight that's behind your tractor, that trailer, right? So it's good to be aware of while you're driving, where is the contact pressure on that Kingpin right now? Right now I'm going up an incline. It's on the back, right? Because the trailer is being pulled. And as you turn, it kind of shifts to, like maybe somewhere between like 3 and 6 o'clock or 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock, the bottom half of the clock. It kind of shifts around there depending on how you're turning. Well, here's where it gets super important, and this is why I'm bringing all of this up. And I'm sorry if I'm a little long-winded with it, but it's really important to me that I'm explaining this in a way that makes sense, because I want it to make sense, because it is absolutely vitally important that you understand it. When the road gets slippery, which we are now entering the season of winter, right? This is when roads become potentially the most slippery they ever are. Well, now you have to worry about one of the things that truck drivers dread the most, and that is jackknifing. Jackknifing is basically a complete and utter loss of control of the truck. Once you jackknife to a certain degree, once it gets to a certain amount of bend, there's no recovering it. You're gone. You're off to the races. And every winter you see unfortunate truck drivers and unfortunate trucks in the ditch, right? Or in the median. They've slid off the road, and 9 times out of 10, well, not 9 times out of 10, but a good amount of the time there's a jackknife involved. And that's why the whole visualization of your Kingpin makes such a difference, and why it's so important. Because if you're aware, if you have a visual in your brain of where is the contact pressure on that Kingpin, you will know when you're at the highest risk for a jackknife. The highest risk for a jackknife is when that Kingpin is pushing forward against the tractor. It's trying to push the tractor forward. That's when you're in trouble, potentially, right? A lot of times you'll hear people say, and they're absolutely 100% spot on correct, never use your jake brakes when it's slippery. The reason they say that is because jake brakes, what are they doing? They're slowing your drive wheels down. So your drive axles are being slowed down by the engine braking, but it's not slowing your trailer wheels down. And that combination, if you have pressure on the Kingpin forward onto your tractor, in other words, the trailer is pushing the tractor, and now all of a sudden you throw your jake brakes on, you are asking for, I wasn't even close, come on, collision warning. You're asking for a breakage in traction of your drive wheels. And all it takes is one little fraction of a second for you to break traction on those drive wheels in that situation where you have weight pushing the tractor down a hill. And if that happens and your trailer tires are not being slowed down, the ass end of that trailer is going to come around and meet your tractor. You are going to jackknife. You're going to lose control. In a dry situation, probably wouldn't be a big deal. It wouldn't affect anything. That's why jake brakes are used all the time in dry conditions, because the tractor is heavy enough, even with all that weight back there, and has good enough traction with the weight of the trailer being smashing down those drive wheels. It has sufficient bite and traction to be able to take it and not break traction. But when you're on ice and snow, all bets are off. It is very easy to break the traction regardless of all those weights. I mean, yes, the weight coming down on the drives does help. Of course it helps. But if you're talking about the forces of gravity pushing that heavy trailer down that hill, and now all of a sudden you're retarding the forward spinning of those drive wheels with a jake brake, that's a deadly combination. So all of that, all of it centers around and revolves around that Kingpin, really, if you think about it. Where are the forces against the Kingpin? And that should tell you when you need to be super concerned and when you're relatively okay, right? So general rule is anytime the tractor is pulling the trailer, so you're pulling against the Kingpin, you're safe. That's when a truck is at its safest, when the tractor is actually doing the pulling. But as soon as that trailer starts pushing, that's when you need to really be careful. The only thing you should be doing to slow down in that situation is using your service brake, your foot on the brake pedal. That's it, nothing else. You should not be trying to use jake brakes. Gearing down at that point, or I should say gearing up at that point to get a high revs in the engine, it's too late for that. You should be thinking of that before you start going down. But if you abruptly change the revs on the engine on a descent, you're asking for trouble. It's going to potentially break the traction of your drive tires. You do not want to do that. You want to keep everything as steady and as fluid as possible with no abrupt changes in steering and absolutely no abrupt changes in the power going to those drive wheels. You want to use your foot brake so that you're applying even braking pressure all the way around to all 18 tires, and use kind of like a squeeze and release. What do they call that? Stab braking, whatever. That's what you use to keep slowing down, so that you're applying even brake pressure. That's the only safe way to manage your speed going downhill. So always keep that in mind. And if you think about a visual picture of your skid plate and where your Kingpin is in that hole, that's a very helpful thing to have in your brain, because it causes you to think of everything else, to think about your throttle input, to think about what brakes you're using and how you're using them, and is this safe to do, or might this break the traction in my drive wheels? The final thought, or the final bit of advice that I would give you is that if you ever do find yourself starting to jackknife, in other words, you've begun to feel a loss of control of the truck, whether it's real or imagined, first off, don't panic. It's very easy to say, it's very hard to do, but be prepared that it might happen to you in advance. Be prepared that you might lose traction, and it's going to feel squirrely as hell, believe me. I've felt it before, and it scares the living shit out of you, because all of a sudden everything feels wonky, and it scares the bejesus out of you. But what you do is, before you're driving in those slippery conditions, as you're releasing your brakes, remind yourself, okay, my battle plan is that if I feel any loss of traction, if I feel like I think the truck is skidding or losing control or, God forbid, jackknifing, there's only one correct answer, and that is get your foot off of everything and steer the truck. That's it. It's that simple. You don't have to think about much beyond that. Your instincts will carry you from that point forward. But any skid in a truck, again, it's a loss of traction. The traction of one or more, usually more, tires has broken free. They're no longer gripping the road. The only chance in hell that you have of those tires re-gripping the road is to stop any throttle input into them and stop any braking input into them. The only thing you have is steering. And if you think that you have to wildly counter steer from one side to the other, you're gonna be in a ditch. Don't do it. Get your foot off of whatever you're on, whether it's the brake or the accelerator, get off of it for a second, and it's usually the brake where people get into trouble. As soon as you feel yourself losing traction, even if it's imagined, you can't hurt anything by get your foot off the brake immediately. Take it off. If it's on the throttle, take it off of that, but it's usually the brake. You feel it's starting to go, you think it's starting to go, get your foot off the brake, see what happens. Steer the truck. That's all you gotta do. Get your foot off the pedal, steer the truck. As soon as you've done that, like if you're coming off the brake, as soon as your foot is off the brake, go over to the throttle, give it a little bit of throttle, light throttle. In other words, just engage the drivetrain without accelerating, if that makes sense. You just want to put pressure on the drivetrain. So that combination, what it's doing is by first letting your foot off the brake, if there is an imbalance in free spinning wheels that have lost traction and some wheels have traction, everything is all wonky. By getting your foot off the brake, you now give all 18 tires the chance to free spin. And when they free spin, they're going to re-grip the road. And all it takes is a second, even less than a second. Like ABS brakes, great example. ABS brakes, when they start pumping the brakes, they pump the brakes in like microseconds because that's all that's required to stop the free spin. It's the same with you letting your foot off the brake. The moment you let your foot off the brake, your tires should start regaining traction immediately because they're rolling forward. They're just no longer free. They're no longer being restricted or propelled by an engine. It's just free spin. As soon as they're free spinning, they regain traction. So once you do that, take your foot off the brake, go right to the throttle immediately, over to the throttle side, put very light pressure, not stabbing, not flooring it, just light pressure on that throttle and hold it. Just so that you're engaging the powertrain onto your drive wheels. And what that will do is, now that your tires are regained in traction, they're regaining traction, that light throttle will hopefully have your trailer shift to being pulled again. Your tractor will all of a sudden be pulling the trailer again, and that's what you want. You want to stop the skidding of the tires, and you want to stop the Kingpin pushing the tractor forward. So that's what you're doing by getting off the brake, focus on steering, get off the brake, put your foot on the throttle just to engage the powertrain. That's it. You don't want to accelerate. That will actually make it worse. Just engage the throttle enough to re-engage your drive wheels against the throttle, against the drivetrain, and just give it a little gentle squeeze so that you're now once again pulling that trailer. And that will hopefully recover you. And that's really about the only way that I know of to regain control in that situation. Now, if there are other drivers watching this that have a lot more experience than me, and there's other things that you know or other tricks or whatever, absolutely feel free to share them. That's, when I bring stuff like this up, I'm not bringing it up to say, hey, look at what I know and look how great I am. That's the last thing on my mind. As a matter of fact, if I ever say something wrong, correct me. Just make sure you're right, because I'll research it. And I want good knowledge being shared out there for drivers. I don't want to see trucks continuously in the ditch, because it's avoidable. It's 100% avoidable. If people are mindful of the things they need to be mindful of, watch your speed, hawk your road conditions constantly. You need to be real time every second aware of the weather conditions, of the road conditions, of all the conditions you're driving in. You need to be aware of it. And once you know that, and you're driving with common sense, you're not overdoing anything, you're keeping a visual perspective going on in your brain about what is my Kingpin doing right now. Okay, I'm accelerating right now, I'm pulling. If I'm pulling, I'm good. The straighter you are and the more you're pulling, the least likely anything is to happen. It's virtually impossible to skid and lose control if you're dead straight and pulling the trailer. It's probably possible, I guess, but I mean the likelihood is pretty much slim to none, unless you're like on a sideways grade or something. But I mean, obviously, within reason. So that's it. Anyway, I just wanted to share that. Just again, visualize that Kingpin, and always have a plan before you start driving. Get yourself prepared. What do I do if I start losing control? And it doesn't matter whether you're actually losing control or not. That's irrelevant. You're better to err on the side of caution than not react at all and end up in a ditch. And the initial reaction, again, is to just take your foot off of the brake, or if you happen to be on the accelerator, just take your foot off and steer the truck. You're not going to hurt anything by doing that. It's not going to send you careening off into a ditch by doing that. If anything, it'll be a momentary second or two, and you'll just kind of, oh, okay, no, I'm good. And then you can get back on your throttle or your brake or whatever you were doing. But if you are skidding and you don't do that, God help you. You're off to the races. So anyway, just wanted to share that. Again, if you have anything to add, anything you want to correct, whatever, I'm all ears. Like I've said repeatedly, I respect the hell out of those that have more experience and knowledge than I do, and I am an information sponge. So anything you're able to pass on, I am all ears, man. I don't know everything. I just like to share what I do know, until I find out that it's wrong. If that ever happens, then of course I'm the first to admit it. So anyway, I'm babbling by now. I am almost at the terminal, and let's call it a week from there. And I hope everybody has a great weekend. Stay safe, stay smart, stay shiny side up, and we will see you soon.